Hello, in this lesson we're going to look at arrow functions. This is an alternative way of creating functions in JavaScript, and we use it extensively in React. So it's important to have a grasp of how arrow functions are constructed and how they're used. So let me start off simply by creating an arrow function. I'll create an equivalent of this log function, but I'll create it using arrow function syntax. And it's very simple. We just use parentheses followed by an arrow followed by curly braces. And that is in fact a complete arrow function. At the moment it doesn't really do a lot, but I can add some code into the curly braces. So let's say we'll copy the code from the log function. And we now have an arrow function that does do something. It will print out hello Fred. But at the moment it's pretty useless because we've got no way of calling it. So the way we do that is one way we can do it is to create a variable that contains this function as a value. So if I say const arrow log, I'm creating a variable called arrow log, and I'm going to have it contain this function. So I'm saying it's equal to this function. And if I export this variable, I can import it over here. And I can call the function in using exactly the same syntax as I did for a regular function. I can say arrow log, and provided it's got a couple of parentheses after it, that means call the function arrow log. And we can see down here, just to make it stand out, let's change this to Jane. And we can see it's printed hello Jane, so it's run the function successfully. And just like ordinary functions, we can have arrow functions that take parameters. So let me just show you one of those. Again, the general syntax is parentheses followed by an arrow followed by curly braces. And just like we put the code in the curly braces, this time I'll copy this function. We can also put parameters in the parentheses, so I can put message in these parentheses. And here we now have a complete arrow function. Again, we can create a variable to contain it. So let's say export const arrow log message. And this variable is going to contain the function, the arrow function below. So let's import this into main.js, and again we can call it just as we did before. We can say arrow log message and arrow message, and you'll see in the browser arrow message has appeared. And finally we can have arrow functions that return values as well. So we'll build one of those. Takes in a message, and there's the arrow and then the code. No surprise, I'm going to copy the code from above, and I'm going to create a variable, contain it, export const arrow make message equals, and I'll import that over here, make message, and I can say const my value equals arrow make message. I'll pass it a new name. Let's pass it Blender. And now my value contains what is returned from arrow make message, and I can print it out. I can say arrow log message my value, and we can see it's printing out the time followed by Blender. And of course we can collapse this. We can say take the call to the function and put it in as a parameter. So what happens here is the first thing that happens is it calls the function arrow make message with the parameter Blender. This returns the time : Blender, and then that is passed to arrow log message, which prints it out. So these are the three equivalents of our three original functions. There is, however, an even simpler syntax for arrow functions, which is sometimes used if the function in question only has a single line of code. So let me show you. If instead of the syntax being like this, if we only have a single line of code in these curly braces, console.log one liner, something like this, then this can actually be reduced. We can leave out the curly braces entirely. And this is a valid arrow function. So I can say const one liner equals and export that. And one liner is now a variable that contains this arrow function, which when called executes this one line of code. In fact, we can even write a arrow function that returns a value in the same syntax. So I can say x const get value equals, and then we can literally return a value here. So I can say render the good, and this will return the string render the good. So let's have a look at calling these two, one liner and get value. So in the case of one liner, I can literally just say one liner like this, and we can see it's printed out one liner down here, this string. And in the second case, I can say log message and pass to it get value, and you'll see it's printed out render the good. So that's arrow functions. In the next lesson, we'll see why they're particularly useful in what are called higher order functions, which are functions that take other functions as parameters. So I'll see you there.